Penn State that people are proud of, people are marketing now and all that. It's Joe. It's those values we talked about earlier on.
Hi, I'm Chris Raymond, author of Men in White, and you're on the All Over the Place podcast, where the fun sanity never ends.
Hello and welcome back to the All Over the Place podcast. I am your host, Eric Portvoznik. As always, kicking off with so much gratitude. So grateful for everybody out there. We, in the last couple of weeks, have been exploding here at All Over the Place, and it's because of you. Thank you so much. Our episodes are growing because you're liking, you're sharing, subscribing. Thank you so much. We're keep getting better and better, folks, because of you, for you, thanks to you. And I want to bring in my co-host, Jim Culver. How are you, Jimbo?
I'm great. How are you?
Well, as you can see, I'm in the blue and white today, looking as dapper as possible, because that's how the man who's the subject of what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's what he would have wanted, I think. So, folks, we know that there's occasionally a Penn State centric show. We got the blue and white going on all over the place, and this one is a little extra special. Our guest is. It's an amazing project that she's done, and it's for Joe Paterno, and a man near and dear to every Penn Stater's heart, at least any Penn Stater worth talking to, as far as I'm concerned. And let's get Debbie in here. Debbie Kevin, welcome to All Over the Place. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric and Jim. It's so wonderful to be here and talking about JoePa.
And because it is Joe Paterno, because it's as near and dear to the heart, and as all of us here. And Jim has become kind of by extension an honorary Penn Stater too, with all the crap he puts up with me, and by proxy Marty as well. But the room might get a little misty at times, folks. It just might, because as I'm surrounded, I've got my Joe Paterno autographed football there. I've got the many books. We'll talk about all this stuff later. My autographed JoePa picture, and just so much to talk about. And Debbie, just tell our All Over the Place listeners and viewers what it was that got you inspired to do the Dear JoePa project.
Thank you. It's such an interesting experience. I happened to be in the Petit and Paterno library doing some research last fall, and I had the archivists in the Paterno library pull all kinds of research on Joe Paterno, because I had this belief that he is so much more than a football coach, and we focus so much on the football side of things, and not to diminish any of that, but he was a humanitarian. He was a thoughtful human being. He was probably the best fundraiser that Penn State ever had. And so much of him and his contributions have sort of been kind of pushed aside. And so literally the very last day was my third day of 8-hour days in the library, going through box after box after box. And doing the research that I was working on, I stumbled upon this box of letters. And these letters were, some of them from, typed up thank you notes for contributions or connections or opportunities. Every single one of them, and there were thousands, had a handwritten note from Joe to the person. And then I stumbled upon an envelope that was oversized. It was a manila envelope, and it was obviously written by a kid. I'm going to get the clumped here. He was, I think, 12, and he hand wrote a 5-page single line letter to Joe talking about his father, how this little boy, his name was Matt, played baseball, and he and his brother had made it to the Williamsburg World Series, but his dad was a huge Penn Stater. And he just went on and on, this huge letter of gratitude for his father, for all the sacrifices that he made. And he said, I know you're busy, Coach Paterno, but my dad's turning 50 and he admires you so much. Would you please come to his birthday party? And in that envelope was the reply from Joe, thanking this young boy for the opportunity to come and celebrate his dad's birthday. So he did it. He showed up, and And there were photographs of the little boy in his baseball uniform and his dad at one of the playoff games, I think the 400th game. And it just sort of stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, there have to be thousands of letters and thousands of people, maybe more, who've been impacted positively by Joe off the football field, outside of the football program. And that's how it got started. I'm like, he would have been 100 next December. And I thought, I want to collect letters. I want people to share their stories. And so that's how it got started.
And we at Penn State Nation cannot thank you enough for that. And it's, like you said, it's more than just the football coach, Joe. This is a guy who quoted Virgil's The Aeneid all the time. He valued education above and beyond anything, character, integrity. And you go through over at Dear JoePa.org, and I want to get that scrolling across the bottom there so everyone knows where to go. You can go there, and you're reading all these testimonials that come in, and for people who had nothing whatsoever to do with football and just chance encounters on campus and what they meant to him, and more testimonials coming in all the time. So I'm very excited and just honored to have you on the show to talk about this. Thank you. But also honored to have with us two guys who had a unique experience with Coach Paterno. They played for him. And I want to invite in now Steve Davis, class of 73, and Dr. Justin Williams from class of 95 and 98, because he has that little doctor next to his name too. So Justin, Steve, welcome to All Over the Place. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
And I'll go to you, Steve, first, because I just very quickly, just one guy who's near and dear to our hearts. And yeah, this is where the room's going to get dusty for the first time, probably. You got to play with Franco Harris, and he is someone who embodied Penn State, was a Nittany Lion ambassador through and through, and stuck by Joe no matter what. And we know we may get into it a little bit later, but no matter what, Franco was there. And so, Steve, what was it like for you to have that, just more than most people, that unique experience of knowing and getting lessons firsthand from Joe?
Well, Joe was like a father figure for most of us. He was a coach. I mean, he was the toughest guy I think I'd ever been coached by. But, you also loved him. But like I said, he was a father figure. He was a guy that pushed you to do more than you ever thought that you could do, be more than you ever thought you could be. And he would always talk to us about being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And so creating this whole team environment, he was a master at that. But also just knowing the individuals within that team, not just knowing you, which was a big deal in itself, but knowing your family. He knew my great grandmother. And years later, he could call people by name. I was sharing earlier, one of my teammates, Jim Cates, who played for Joe. He was middle linebacker for in that when they went 11-0, 2 in a row. And Casey was drafted by Washington, got hurt before his first game, never got a chance to play. So he never came back. He never came back to Penn State. And I ran into him, and we got talking, and I talked him into coming up, and we went up there, and Tim Curley got us into one of the sessions, one of the press conferences, and Joe was coming off the stage, and all the press was behind him, cameras flashing and all that stuff. And he sees Jim, and he just stopped right in his tracks, and he turns around and is just telling the press, "This is Jim Cates. He's from Plainfield, New Jersey. His mother's a heck of a card player." Just went on and on. And we wouldn't have been able to run the split six if it wasn't for Jim. He gave us the option to do these things. It was just amazing. It was amazing. And like I said, Jim hadn't been there since he had graduated. So you're talking almost 50 years. So he was just that type of person, that type of humanitarian. Yeah, I mean, he's a. We were talking earlier about just being a generational figure.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see many people like this in a lifetime. So you're lucky if your paths cross and you have an opportunity to spend time with them.
And Justin, to you were at Penn State about the same time I was. I 2 years earlier, well, like 3 years earlier. So you got to play pretty incredible team there with the '94 team. What was your experience like with Joe? Because Steve had him towards the beginning of his coaching career. You're in the middle there. What was that like for you?
Well, first was I think really interesting to talk about is that Steve's graduating year from Penn State was the year I was born. Okay.
Thanks, Justin.
So I mean,
boy, we're throwing the daggers out there early. Okay, we're gonna get it out of the way. All right.
But I just think it speaks to the fact that Joe came to my house, spring of my senior year when he didn't have to come to my house in Unionville, Long Island, New York. I was committed August before my senior year started. And I ended up being the first person they offered I ended up being the number one class in America that year in the class of 91. We were the top class in America that year. And it was like a consensus kind of vote. And I was hook, line, and sinker going to Penn State. And Joe came to my house anyway, came to my school. And my parents loved him from the beginning. But, the fact that he could connect over that kind of time with two kids with darker skin and have their families fall in love with him over that period of time, and then even after me, is a testament to the kind of human being Coach Paterno was. I watched him and learned from him and met with him at least once every year while I was an undergrad, because I'm not sure what I had in me that made me feel like it was my right to get to know him very well while I was playing for him. But I got to know him really, really well and learned a lot about how to run a big organization and some really specific things that he did that helped us build towards that 94 team. But he had excellent teams in every decade that he coached. So he knew what he was doing, and there was a formula that he was following. And I feel like part of that formula was that he was purposely looking to get a really good mix of kids from different backgrounds, socioeconomic, ethnic complexion, who he wanted to win with. He wanted to win in that way. And now more than ever in American history, that kind of leadership is necessary. We are sorely lacking leaders who are trying to really bring people together to accomplish something greater than themselves. And Coach Paterno, as well as anybody in American history, accomplished that. And it was a huge honor to be able to look at him closely and watch him day to day make decisions that were in the best interest of the program, not individuals, but in the best interest of the program, while still taking care of kid number 120 on the team who wasn't necessarily getting out there and playing, but he was still managing a program that made kid 120 go hard and feel like he was a part of things. And that goes to the kind of mantra that he would say, you take care of the little things and the big things take care of themselves. I learned from one of the many things I learned is that if you know that a kid 120 on your team is happy, you don't have to worry about the top 20 or 30 kids. I just can't say enough about him. I have the highest respect for him as a football coach, as a human being, as an intellect. I became an English teacher because of his influence. I'm teaching now for 26 years here in Long Island, New York. And being able to talk to my football coach about literature is not something I ever thought I would do when I went to Penn State. But he was a special human being, and that's why we continue to do these sorts of things and to talk about him, and we won't forget him. And it's our responsibility to make sure that the world understands who he really was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Success with honor, and you guys tipping a tip of the old all over the place mug here for what you did, being part of that success with honor and being part of the grand experiment. And for those who don't know what the grand experiment is, Joe wanted his players to be able to compete for a national championship at least every 4 years, and doing it with integrity, going to class, graduating, everything that went with success with honor.
But let me add what also that meant, Eric. It also meant that guys like Steve and I, well after our time at Penn State, would represent ourselves, our families, our communities, and the Penn State brand with love and respect, with intellect, and that was for Joe part of that as well. It wasn't just what we accomplished while we were there. All of us generationally heard him say again and again, I don't care what you guys think about me while you're here, but I certainly care about what you think about me 10 years after you leave here. That was the grand experiment in its totality.
See, I'm glad I got more context from that one. So another tip there to you, Justin. Thank you.
And if I could add to Justin's point, the impact of that grand experiment is something that it does live on. In fact, we were talking about actually putting together a curriculum, a grand experiment curriculum, because these values, about the wins, about other things that he's done, but it's the values that he shared with all of us that makes this whole thing intergenerational, right? Because the things that I've learned, I've passed on to my kids, to the students that I've coached and taught. Those same values, those same the mantras that Justin mentioned. You're either getting better or you get worse. You never stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to my schools, my kids can finish that. My teachers will finish that statement, right? I mean, it lives on. My grandkids can finish that, and I'm just one. When you go back to all the folks that Joe's touched, it's amazing. And just for the record, I was one of those people when I came to Penn State. I was that 120 person, right? I came in as a walk-on.
Wow.
And I wound up starting in the Sugar Bowl, right? So
Love it.
All of this happened really at one point in particular. I remember Joe stopping me on the field at practice and pulling me over and just saying, "Listen," he's scribbling on a piece of paper. I always wondered what he was scribbling, right? Boats. He was scribbling boats. It was like
He was always scribbling.
He calls me over and just says, you can make this team. You can play. Not just make the team. You can really play. And from that point on, I mean, it was a whole nother perspective, but took it, seriously. And again, like I said earlier, he makes you do things that you really didn't think you could do.
And as a baseball, I just started baseball coaching, high school baseball this year. And I remind the kids, well, first I kicked off the season with deep down, believe that you're destined for greatness. But I think my mom and dad put that in my head early on. And also what you brought up earlier, Justin, with it, take care of the small things. The big things will take care of themselves. That's what it comes down to.
When I was a football coach, varsity football coach, my mantra in my team was be fit, B-F-I-T-T, be fit. And all of my kids, JV and varsity, had to know what it meant. And it's everything that I took from playing at Penn State. Be on time, football a high second, academics an undisputed first. I'm a champion because I go hard for my colors, my brothers, and my community. Take care of the little things, and the big things take care of themselves. And the greatest things we achieve in life are those we accomplish with others. That's what Be Fit is, and that's what I learned at Penn State. And it's just the kids and the coaches just came up together around that mantra. But I got that why from Joe. And that's what he did for 40 years as a head coach. Is he brought different people from different backgrounds together underneath that mantra, and it worked. It will work in any time period if you have the right person who believes in it and lives it and is authentic about it. It's leadership 101, and we need more of it.
Amen to that. And I need to bring in someone else here. Another, the last of the Penn State crew, the last of the blue and white. One of my friends for the longest time I met at Penn State in the theater program. He's been a guest on All Over the Place a couple of times now, and he even played Coach Paterno back when we were on the old podcast. AJ Laird, occasionally Coach Joe. How are you, my friend? Thanks for joining us here.
Oh, thanks for the invite. Although I'm feeling like the water boy in this conversation here now. I'm the scrub. I'd be number 121.
Yeah, well, you're right. Even though I walked into Haluba Hall once, and I accidentally, me and a couple other guys, and we were going to be eating the food that the football players did. They was before everyone did their practice or something. Like, they just figured we were on the team. I was tall. I was much skinnier at the time. I could have passed for a punter, but my friend Jim could have passed for a quarterback. But but we eventually got kicked out. So I'm right there with you, AJ. We're 121 and 122. So, but. Yes. But as a non-football player, it's just someone who, Joe Paterno means a lot to all Penn Staters. What did he mean to you?
Oh, everything. I mean, growing up in South Central Pennsylvania, the name Joe Paterno, it's not even a person. It's a concept. It's an idea. But coming to Penn State and then being there, my perspective of being around the coach, because and I'm sure the fellas can attest to this. He never put on airs. It was never about him. I was very fortunate to as a non-athlete to be around him quite often. I lived in North Halls, and I was there for all 4 years of the. Any of you that are listening that have been to State, you kind of know the geography of where things are. And North Halls is not too awful far away from the stadium. And the Paternos lived right down the street from us. So it was not uncommon for me to just be walking to campus or just walking outside my dorm. And at least once a week, he didn't drive. He walked to the stadium every day, unless it was raining or the weather was bad. So he was always out among the students. He never put on airs. He never was, no offense to any of the coaches today where it's all about celebrity and it's all about them. He was just there. He was Penn State through and through, whether you were a student, whether you were an athlete, whether you were a faculty member, anyone who had anything to do with that university, he was all about you. And it never swayed away from saying hello and shaking a hand and just being a part of everything. And that was always very touching to me, because he could have very easily, put on a major attitude with people feeling that he's very godlike there. And I heard from people that went to other schools that were very culty and all of that thing. And maybe back then, maybe there was some truth to that amongst the student body, I suppose. But it's for all of the reasons that the fellas were saying. It is success with honor, and it is the grand experiment, and it is your academics come first. And yeah, if that means that we're kind of cult like, then so be it. But why not have things positive like that? I also had I didn't get kicked out like Eric from the dining hall. My sophomore year, my roommate was on the football team. He was a walk-on, but he was allowed to bring people. So I got snuck into meals and to practices and to meetings and got to see a lot of behind the scenes things then too. So it was great just to kind of see Joe man about town, and then, Joe right at work. Pretty much the same guy all the time. I mean, a little more intense in the facility than he would be walking down the street, but just a great guy to be around. And if you're going to try to raise your kids in light of someone, you'd be hard pressed to find someone else to kind of put on a pedestal.
Well, like Steve brought up earlier, father figure, a grandfather figure, an uncle, and just everything to everybody. And do we want to get into the time, AJ, where you almost took out Joe on one of his walks? You knew it was coming.
I had a feeling. Yeah. So oh boy. So I didn't have a car.
He didn't, folks. The important part is, and I'll let AJ take it from here.
He was fine. He was fine. So as I mentioned, Coach would oftentimes, when it was very nice out, he would walk to work. I did not have a car on campus for the majority of my time there, but my senior year, end of my junior year, and throughout my senior year, I did have a car on campus. And one day, I just happened to be driving up towards my dorm, and here comes Coach Paterno, and just kind of walking towards me, and not really paying much attention. And parallel to me on the sidewalk was a little kid on a little BMX bike. And he was all excited to see Joe. And he was like, "Oh, Coach Paterno." And he's looking at the kid, not looking at all about what's coming, steps into traffic right in front of my car. So had there been someone in the other lane, we might be having a very different conversation here, but I was able to swerve around him. And this is where you kind of pull over and you hear your heartbeat for about an hour and a half, because you're just thinking, oh my gosh, what would I have done? I'd have to go back to my room, pack up my stuff, and get out of there immediately had something happened. It was horrifying, but thankfully it was a good turnout, and he never even knew anything happened and just went about his business. And I just thought, okay, this was an interesting experience. He almost took out the face of the university. That would have been a bad day.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
We're glad you didn't. We're glad you didn't get your degree from Penn State Branch Campus Harrisburg.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Although my dad did tell me later that day, he says, "Well, look at it this way." He tried to put a smile on my face. He goes, "Had this happened, yes, it would have been horrible, but you probably would have had a full scholarship to any other college in the nation had they known this story." I said, "That's awful. How could you say such a thing?" Probably wasn't wrong though.
Bob Laird, Sugar.
Yes.
Sugar Bear, keeping it real.
Yes, indeed.
And Debbie, as we're hearing these all these unique stories, what has been the feedback, and what have been some of the more unique stories you've heard as you've been getting this project rolling and continuing?
Yeah, that's such a great story. It's been interesting because I've gotten a few stories about Joe sending letters to former players who they're outside of their eligibility, and they may have gone to the Sugar Bowl or the Orange Bowl, and they may have spent a little bit of the university's money. And I'm talking like $12, or in some cases, I found letters that were $2. And it's like, I can't force you to do anything, but you're going to know, and I'm going to know that you owe the university money. And Jeff Bergstrom was one of the contributors. He sent a bunch of stories in, and that he shared one of those letters with me. And I think that, again, it goes back to that integrity that we talked about. And both Steve and Justin really mentioned that it's how you do the little things and the big things. It's how you do everything. And so there's those. There was a story of a woman who she bid on an air balloon ride, or Joe won an air balloon ride, and he took her up in the air balloon. It had I'm misremembering all of the details, but there's just been so many of these, not necessarily even direct. It's like just letters saying, he never knew me, but I followed his example. We went to Penn State. We are generational Penn Staters. And Steve and I were talking about this, and Justin and I worked as well, that it's more than just about our generation. It's the generations before us, and it's even our children and our grandchildren who have this great gift of that thread of the grand experiment living on through us and through our example. And I think that's really important for Penn Staters, the generations that are there now and those that are after, because they didn't get the benefit of those direct interactions and the walking down the street or running into them at TCBY or any of those things, or the creamery. And it's just so important. And I think it's really the soul of Penn State as an institution, and I don't want to lose it.
Were there any stories you came across that kind of surprised you or made you see Coach Paterno in a different light?
That's a really good question. I would say not so much surprised me, more delighted. I've had the very great fortune of being involved in the film The Joe We Know. And so I've heard a lot of stories, and a lot of the stories repeat themselves because, for a guy who spent 61 years at one institution, the stories of the lettermen in particular are similar, but those of us in the community have similar stories where there was a really cute story actually of a guy who was a student at Penn State, or he needed to get a haircut for some reason. And he went to all these different barbershops and they were all like overflowing. It was a game weekend, or there was something going on that made the barbershops in particularly crowded. So he finally found one and he walked in. He was the only person in the room, and he took off his glasses and was getting his hair cut. And then the door opened and it was Joe. And Joe was coming in for a trim, and he said, we chatted about football. We chatted about how the team was doing. He asked about my family. And he went on to say, for just a brief moment, our glasses were touching on the table between us as we were getting our haircuts. Later on, that same gentleman, his daughter wanted to call and wish Coach Paterno a happy birthday. And Joe's number was in the phone book. And so she plucked up all of her courage and she called, and Sue answered the phone. And at that point, Joe had been hit on the sidelines. And so he was actually using a walker to get around his home as he healed. And so Sue talked to her and she just said, yelled, Joe, you have a call. And Joe slowly made his way to the phone and they had a wonderful conversation. Years later, the same guy ran into Joe at the Sugar Bowl, I think, or this Orange Bowl. And Joe remembered his daughter and he said, tell her how much I appreciated that she called to wish me good health and a happy birthday. And he asked all about how she was doing. So there's those kinds of stories too, that it's just amazing.
Yeah.
And Steve and Justin, your coaches, teachers, have there been any moments as you passed along the wisdom that you got from Joe that, in particular, maybe touched a particular student and maybe inspired them to either dig more into learning about Joe or eventually maybe going to Penn State? I'll go to you first on that one, Justin.
Well, quite coincidentally, I think that when Debbie talked about Joe rehabilitating as a result of being hit on the sideline, the kid who was tackled into Joe, that injured Joe, I coached that kid in high school.
Oh, wow.
And I took him and 5 of our other captains going into their senior year. I drove them to Penn State for the senior football camp, and that kid's name is Andrew Corliss. And so it's just kind of the 6 or less degrees of separation we have here just in this space. And one of the things I've always it's always baffled people about Penn Staters who are not Penn Staters. They don't understand how a school can be so big and yet people act like we know each other, right? And so you explain that to people by getting them to understand, when you go to State College in August, you generally don't leave until Thanksgiving, and then you come back and then you're there until December. Then you come in January, you don't leave until spring break, and then you are gone in May. But those are the kind of the 2 times in the semester you leave, and we don't need to leave. Everybody else who wants to party in the area, they come to party at University Park, and we stay the entire time. And because we stay, and because it's not an urban place where we could leave campus and kind of go to like Philly or Pittsburgh, we just hang around, and it's 40,000 of us, but you kind of just have this feeling of just being home. And so anytime, that we see a Penn State insignia anywhere that we go, we say what we say and we get a response, and it's just that love, right? So I'll just share that that's how I connected to. That's right. What Debbie said. As soon as Debbie said Joe got hurt, I knew that it was a guy I'm responsible for sending to Penn State who hurt Joe. And please know I have received tons of hell for that over the years.
And I didn't mean to cut you off with that, but okay, Jim, follow along if you want. We are
Penn State, baby.
There we go. And I'm so glad I was able to do that. I've been practicing that all afternoon, so I could do it smoothly like that. Very good. So yes, all that theater training there, AJ, that came in handy right there. Yes, it did.
See, I'm a Gonzaga alumnus, so AJ says he feels like a water boy. I feel like a transfer student right now.
We'll take your credits. They'll take your credits.
So, Steve, the question to you, I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you didn't have any of your students run into Joe on the sidelines accidentally or debilitating or otherwise, but anything that you have to share in that regard?
Well, one thing I was wondering, AJ, did you stay in the Beam Hall? Is that where you were?
I was in Holmes.
In Holmes?
I was in Holmes. Yeah, the whole time I was there, because of my financial aid, I could not live off campus. So I had the same floor, the same room, same building all 4 years I was there. So I had the same route all the time. And then, here comes Joe, every day. So it was great. It was really cool to be able to see him for the whole 4 years I was there.
And frankly, it was amazing to me. I spent 1 year in North Halls in Beam Hall, and my roommate and I were both PE majors, and we wanted to coach. So we studied Joe. And after practices and after game, we would both come back and debrief things. And why did he make this decision? And what do you think he was thinking when he did that? And then he would just walk by our window, which kind of blew me away.
Yep. This way,
on his way to practice. So it just, like you said, it just made him that much more human. But as far as passing, I would bring a lot of my players up to the Penn State camps, and it's for me that it was a great thing for me. I mean, obviously they enjoyed it; they're wide-eyed and everything. But for me, just to bring my kids up and get a taste of that kind of experience was great. My son, of course, but also my players. But what's really neat is that 10, 20 years later, this is really a big deal in these kids' lives. And I just recently retired from one school, and at the SMU game, one of my players showed up at the game. So it is. It's a generational thing. And like I said, he's a special person. When that type of a person enters your life, you're blessed. Actually, I don't know if Debbie has shared her story about how she met Joe.
I think we've all heard it, but you know what? Let's let everybody hear that one now, Debbie, and tell us about your run. I think you mentioned the place a little bit earlier, so over to you for your Joe story.
Thank you. So I just have one Joe story, but I feel like it was, again, it was a very transformational experience. Just a tiny bit of background was I worked full-time and went to school full-time. And so I actually started at Penn State in the fall of '81 and had to stop after, in 1982, I ran out of money. And so I worked for 8 years before buying a place up in State College and moving up there to go to school full time. So I was working still full time at a wonderful little company called Gwynn Dobson and Foreman. I was an administrative assistant to the senior vice president, and he had been a Penn Stater. He was a baseball player in the '60s, very supportive. So my first semester back, I had calculus, I had statistics, and I had macro and microeconomics. So a pretty math heavy background. And although my first career, I was a CPA, I'm not so great with numbers, and statistics was baffling to me. Got my first D, and I made an appointment to go see the TA to talk through what wasn't sinking into my brain. And during that conversation, she said to me, well, maybe you're too old to go back to school. Have you considered that? And it struck me so hard that literally I'm gathering up my books to get out of that room before I burst into tears. And I'm waking my way back from the whichever building it was. The class was in the Forum. I don't remember the building that I was coming from, but I was walking back to my office, which was on Allen Street. And I knew I couldn't go back because if Denny saw me, he would have flipped out. So I went to TCBY and I'm standing in line and I'm crying, waiting for my turn, when all of a sudden I hear all this hubbub behind me. And I wasn't consciously aware of what people were shouting, but I heard people shouting. And then I heard Joe's voice, very distinctive voice. And he was right behind me in line and everyone was yelling, hey, Joe, hey, Joe. And he turns around, and he was saying hi. Well, when I turned around to see what the commotion was, he saw my face. And he'd started talking to me and he was asking, am I okay? And I burst into tears again. And I'm like, I'm going to fail out. And I left a job and I came here to go to school and maybe I'm too old. And he just listened and he talked to me while we're online in getting frozen yogurt. And he said to me, you're a smart girl. You got into Penn State. You've worked hard to get here. You can do this. And when you get your grades back up, come up to the athletic tutoring office, because our students can use your help. And I'm very sure that interaction is the reason that I stayed in school and I graduated, because it was not an easy time. I mean, it was a very hard time with money, and I'd given up a lot to move to State College, and I just remember thinking, I'm nobody. And he was so kind. And I just, I feel like I owe an awful lot to him.
Family, studying, then football, putting others first. That was the Joe Paterno way. Absolutely. Yep. And anyone who knew him, either reading about him or having firsthand experiences, knew that. And AJ, of course, you're in Wisconsin now, but you're working in academia. Have you been able to pass along any of the JoePa wisdom and maybe slid some people out of state over to Happy Valley?
Absolutely. I've been very fortunate to work in education the last 28 years, and it's not as drastic as let's say Debbie's example, but I work at a technical college, so it's more of a community school, so it's all open enrollment, but we get a lot of working adults and students that don't think they can make it, or a lot of students that never felt that they were going to go to college or could ever think of going to college. They didn't have the money, they didn't have the academics, they didn't have whatever they felt that college people have or do. And so a lot of my job as a counselor there is just making sure that people understand that they can do it. You put forth the effort and you can absolutely do it. And yeah, it's going to be work, and yeah, it's going to be tough, but anything worth having is worth working for. So having that strong Penn State background has certainly helped in my career working in education for almost the last 3 decades.
I love hearing stuff like that. I do. And Debbie, you mentioned earlier about, just Joe's presence, maybe not as well known with kids, especially Joe passing away when he did in 2012. And you hear these stories. And that's why I included Landon Tengwall's book is over my shoulder here. Landon's been a guest on the show, and he is just exploding now in his post-football career within the podcasting and beyond world. But he's someone who is, through his interaction with football alums like you guys, Justin and Steve, and just getting to know Joe Paterno. And he has really taken it upon himself to dive in the deep end and learn more about how great a person he was. And Debbie, just following up on what you said earlier about, just different stories, people coming up to you as you're moving forward with the project. What's it been like introducing a younger generation to Joe Paterno, and how are they taking to it?
I was very fortunate that I had the opportunity to be interviewed by a young junior at Penn State for an article on Onward State. And he did a wonderful job, and it's actually a very long interview, but we spent so much time together. And he was talking about how his mother was a Penn Stater, and he said, I don't think the students today really know or appreciate what Joe has done for this university, and that the university that they're attending today is as a direct result of his vision for what Penn State could be. And also what it is already today, his philanthropy, he was fundraising always. I mean, Justin mentioned that he went, visited the high school when he came to see Justin. He always brought autographs, and he would sign things, and he would meet with the students. And he did that all over, meeting all different, people in all the different high schools, whether they were going to be his players or not. And just that kindness and that awareness, I think, is just something super important. And I was so proud of the young author who wrote that article, because he recognized it and he said, I think this is so important, and I want to make sure that we're helping to get the word out so that people can understand and see that Penn State is what Penn State is today because of the groundwork and the dedication that Joe put forth every single day of his time at Penn State, from the time he set foot when it was a Cal college and he arrived, by train, and till he sadly left in 2012.
And in that time since, of course, we've had Dr. Spanier on the show a couple of times, so I don't want to rehash any of the things with the scandal as far as I'm concerned. But as Penn Staters, and especially Debbie with the project, have you gotten any pushback or skepticism? Because why are you honoring this person who is tied to all of this nastiness and ugliness?
I have not gotten letters like that. I have received, of all the things that have come in, there have been a couple that have just said some really inappropriate things. And I didn't not expect that might happen. But on the whole, everyone who's sending letters or sharing their stories, they're doing it because the stories are important to live on and share what we want. And here's I think the big gift of what happened at the end of Joe's career is that people like you and Justin and AJ and Steve and Jim, we wouldn't be meeting. We would never have met under normal circumstances. And that's the same with, all my big brother lettermen who I've worked with at the Joe We Know and the alumni associations. I would never have met all of these people. And I think our community is even stronger as a result of what happened, because we pulled together and we talked to each other. And I think if there's any silver lining to that experience, it's that one.
Amen. Amen. And of course, now Beaver Stadium getting a little bit of an overhaul, a name, and something new that has popped up over at dearjoepa.org is the nomination for honorific naming. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So that was shared with me, and I got permission to put it up on the website. And the document was submitted in the hopes that we could name the field, obviously, at Paterno Field at Beaver Stadium. And that, as we all know, did not happen. But the document itself is actually, it includes all of the things we've been talking about. Joe as a philanthropist, the spiritual impact, the impact on the university, his fundraising, his approach to the grand experiment. And of course, there's all of those, trying to encapsulate, 61 years of impact in a 75-page document, so that it's not lost, so that it's there, so people can say, oh, I had no idea that he did this as well.
And Justin and Steve, what kind of pushback or what encounters have you had as people who knew Joe better than most people. And just in terms of honoring Joe, what's it been like for you to continue doing that? I'll go to you for Justin first on this one.
So around 2012, 2013, and during that time when the news had broken nationally about what ended up being the national story, not necessarily the truth, but what ended up being the national story. There were some tense moments that and I'm sure a lot of us had in our respective neck of the woods, where as we were really kind of delving through things ourselves to figure out what was what, all I could tell people was that, outside of my own father, Joe is a chief mentor in my life. And after, examining as much as I could all of the evidence surrounding that entire affair, much more than at least 95% of the people on the planet, that I delved through all of that information. And after so doing, if I felt for a second that Coach Paterno had participated in some sort of cover-up, if I thought Dr. Spanier, Tim, and Gary, if I felt that they had participated in any cover-up based on the extensive reading and analysis that I've done with just the public documentation, I would have no problem disavowing these people as a career educator and coach and parent of 4 of my own children. I would disavow these folks in a second, but my analysis has showed me that what happened was not accurate. Let's just say that. And I'm
we're on the same page with that one. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm quite confident at this stage of my life in saying that, and I will say it in the same tone and measure that I'm saying it now, just because I recognize that most people that I would encounter and have encountered who want to engage me in this conversation haven't read half of the things, not even a quarter of the things that I've read. So I've realized some things that I will say to them that immediately I know, like, are you aware of this? And the answer is no, I didn't know that. My God, I didn't know that. And they don't really know really what happened at all. And so those of us who are insiders understand much better than other people what occurred and why it occurred. And the bottom line is Coach Paterno is due his due. He has passed. He impacted my life heavily, as he did many other people. Deb, hearing your story, I'm hearing it for the first time. And so, like, I want to be connected to you forever just because of that story. It's beautiful, it's profound. And I say that because I lost my mom a couple of months after I graduated from Penn State. And I have found over the course of my life that people that I knew before, that knew her, I have gravitated towards. And I'm sure there's some psychological reason that we could all kind of understand behind why I've done that. But I have felt the same way about people who had interactions with Joe like that. I had a lot more interactions with Joe that I could talk to in some detail that will stay with me forever. But I feel more connected to people who knew him and had those interactions with him, because he just had a magnificent presence and did a ton for a lot of people, did a ton for Central Pennsylvania, did a ton for Penn State and the brand. And he did it with the right principles, always at the forefront. And all of us now know, as a result of what happened, how easily it is to forego your principles because of pressure to succumb to a popular discourse, even when it's not accurate. And I am no longer ashamed. There were moments where I was ashamed about feeling like, standing up for him. But now I know enough to know there's no more shame in me standing for us and Joe, and I'll never feel that again. All I feel now is I have to do right by my mentor.
Yeah.
We all got to stand up to E-Spin, the worldwide deceiver, but that's another show. And Steve, to you, as someone who knew Joe, a lot longer than any of us here, what would your biggest testimonial to Coach B?
Well, like we were saying, and like Justin was saying, when all of this happened, it was such a shock. It's like to say it ain't so, but I became a sponge in terms of just finding out as much as I could and reading as much as I could. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to get as close to the truth as I could possibly get. Reading Graham Spaniard's book, In the Lion's Den, and all of this, it just gave me, and then, talking to the people that I do know who are close to Joe, and then especially Sue, and I never forget Sue saying that, they used to have coaches over for parties and whatnot after games, and they'd be out in the pool, and, Jerry would be out in the pool and with the grandkids. And she said, if you ever thought for 1 minute that I thought that there was something going on, that I would allow my grandkids to be out there, then you're crazy. And that spoke a lot to me. Bottom line is, you hold up the sign, you say, we are. Like Justin was saying, that whole brand, we are really Joe. I mean, you have to really understand that. I mean, the Penn State that people are proud of, people are marketing now and all that, it's Joe. It's those values we talked about earlier on. So one of the things that we're doing as former players of Joe, I have a weekly, not a weekly, during the season, it's a weekly Zoom session with some of my teammates. When I moved back here, it was a way of me just reconnecting with people. And so for the last 5 years, an hour before every game, we get together on Zoom and we connect. Some of these guys haven't seen each other since graduation. We're talking 50 years, right? So as we've progressed, we decided that it's really important for us to find ways to honor Joe. So what we've done is, as players of Joe, as well as lettermen and non-lettermen, we try to find an appropriate way to honor Joe and Sue, because they were a team. I mean, there's no way around that. They were a team. So, and let the young folks who don't know about him learn about the values, learn about who this person was, who was bigger than so much more than a football coach. What were the contributions to the university, academically, culturally, the physical, the athletic legacy, all of that. How do we do that? How do we get that out there to them? So one way we're doing this is we have a T-shirt that we put together that we're going to distribute for the blue-white game, before the blue-white game. So maybe I could get that to you and show it to you. But the whole idea is, one thing that we think we can do is get the statue back. If we can't get the field, let's get the statue back. All right. So the T-shirt says, restore the statue. Picture of the statue, bring Joe home. All right. So
I say we put it in front of the library. If they're not going to put it at the field, at least put it in front of the library.
We've got a couple places that we've identified, and that's what we're pushing for. But that was one of them. But again,
right, put one at each. There
you go. But again, I like to get this T-shirt out. The other part of the T-shirt that I'm proud of is that on the back there'll be a QR code. And the QR code will take you to some videos of Joe. So it's an attempt to get people to actually see who this person is. People have never seen him, who've heard about him, get to see who he is. One is Joe as a father figure, or as a father, with his kids and whatnot. The other is Jimmy Cephalo's eulogy, where he spoke about the team as Joe's legacy. The players are his legacy. And then the third one is a tribute to Joe, which is more football oriented. But the whole idea is to bring this whole thing alive so people know who this statue really is. Mm-hmm. And that we are Joe's values. That's what the we are really is. Otherwise, Penn State is hollow. And
I got to get it in very quickly because I know there's a lot of haters, and it's the people with the win a natty or nothing mentality. But I love the fact that James Franklin is still carrying on Joe's traditions of academics first, and he's getting quality guys in there before he gets quality players. And if he gets both, hey, all the better. And I think we're getting both right now because James Franklin understood Joe Paterno more than any of these natty or nothing people will ever give him credit.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that for a little bit?
If we're going to get absolutely.
I just want to say that I'm immensely proud of the job that Coach Franklin has done in taking over the program. And, I have to speak frankly, right, so that people start to understand how at least some people feel. If I was James Franklin and I was the first African American who was the head football coach at Penn State University, okay, I would do what he's done and give Joe and the legacy it's due, because that's something that you're supposed to do when you have this position. But it's also an albatross around your neck, and it's a heavy burden to bear. And he's borne it quite well, as well, I think, as you could do. And I imagine that, at some point in time, he's 11 years in now, and he still has to, answer questions about Joe. But that's what happens when you follow a legend. And it seems that he was aware that he would have to do that. And I know it's a difficult thing for him to have to be concerned now about the field naming and anything else having to do with Joe, because 11 years in as head coach, he's established his own legacy. And I'm sure that there are some parts of him that kind of wants this all to go away so that he continue to do the things that he certainly has been doing to live up to the expectations that he has on him based on what happened at Penn State before his arrival. But that problem that he has is not his responsibility. It's the responsibility of the Board of Trustees, who, until they do right by what Penn Staters wish to see happen, people like James are going to have to continue to answer questions that he doesn't really want to answer, because it stops him from focusing on what we want to see. We want to see a national championship. And we're really, really close, and hope that next year is a year or the year after. But at some point in time, we can all feel it. We're close. And he deserves to be able to go through a season where he doesn't have to answer a question about Coach Paterno. But the reason that he does is not his fault, because he has done what he needs to do. From a letterman's perspective, he's done and said all the right things. But it's never going to be enough until other people in the university recognize that many of us are never going away, and we're not going to stop until we get what we know is right for Joe Paterno and Sue Paterno. They deserve to be recognized. They helped build Penn State into what it is today. And I'm sorry personally that Coach Franklin has to continue to answer for that. It's not his responsibility, though. It's the responsibility of other people who are leading the university. And I'm a huge fan of James Franklin. I'm super proud of him. I'm super proud that he is leading our program. I can't say enough about the job that he's done. And I'm quite sorry that he is surrounded by people who won't take that burden off of his throat.
Well, I am one of those guys at the Penn State watch parties. I'm the cowbell guy, so I'll get the gang riled up. I'll do I say blue, you say white. I say JoePa, you say Turno. I say James, you say Franklin. We're all in this together and moving forward. Again, James Franklin, thank you for continuing Joe's traditions and bringing in quality people to Penn State. And we've before I let everybody go, I once again want to thank everyone. And Debbie Kevin, thank you so much. Folks, make sure you check out the DearJoePa.org project and leave your stories or read all the stories. They are so good. Be prepared to have tissues nearby when you do it. And it's just an amazing collection. And we've mentioned the name Sue Paterno quite a bit throughout the evening here. And what has her reaction been like, or have you gotten any feedback from her? Is she aware of the project?
She's definitely aware of the project, and I've heard it secondhand. I did let her know ahead of time. I've been lucky enough to meet her on several occasions, and she's aware for sure, and she's very touched by the outpouring, because I think she's a little afraid that we're going to forget, Joe and all of his impact and his heart. And so it's absolutely my gift and my honor to be able to do this and be the recipient of these stories and the letters. And I hope that all of you here in this room who have stories will also submit them, because the more we share, the better the chance that the younger generation will have it. And I hope that maybe someday this will go into the All-Star Sports Museum at Beaver Stadium, so they can live on for forever. And maybe, who knows, maybe all that will happen, because even Joe's statue, wherever it ends up, it's more than Joe's statue. I mean, that whole diorama, for lack of a better word, included all of Justin's and Steve's and all of the players, their accomplishments. It was so much bigger than Joe, and to wipe all of that out, it just feels wrong.
That's the nicest word that I'm glad you said that, because I have a few other choice words that I'd rather not. We're going to keep this a PG-13 show today. So, yeah. But I just very quickly, I'm going to share this in literary form where I can be a little bit more verbose, and I'll do my best to be succinct here. I wanted to share my story with Joe, and because I would see him from time to time. I had indoor soccer as one of my PE classes. Yeah, it was rough, folks. We had to take 6 credits of physical education while at Penn State. It was very, it's that broad-based education that we love. That's shut it, Gonzaga. Go shoot some hoops, which is pretty much all I did my freshman year with the rec hall right next to me. Snyder Hall, closest walk 6 times a year, even closer to the basketball court and rec games. So I would see Joe from time to time and just hello, just nothing major, but I found out that Joe made appointments with students, whether football player, whatever. And I said, well, you know what? I've been Penn State from birth. My dad was a Barron. I've been bleeding blue and white my whole life. And so made an appointment and went in, and I met AJ by this point. So I brought up Terrence, that was on the football team. He took himself out of a meeting to keep our appointment. And he signed my copy of By the Book, his autobiography for my dad, became a Christmas present for my dad. He signed my Sportsman of the Year up there. And thank you again, Paul Keeler, for giving me that Sports Illustrated. And just talked for nothing more than 10 minutes, nothing big. Thanked him, went on my way. A few years later, I'm getting married, and I was being Catholic, and I'd actually seen Joe at church a few times out there in State College. And my grandmother went to the same parish for her time in State College. And it was going to cost me over $100 to get a letter from the Pope. I'm like, I've been paying my dues all my life to the Vatican. So I just flippantly write a letter to Joe saying, you probably don't remember me, but I was a friend of Terrence Williams, and just we met back in 92, 93, and I'm getting married to a girl who went to Alabama, and so don't hold that against her, this, that, the other. And 2 weeks later, I get a letter with the Penn State letterhead on. I'm like, well, that was a quick rejection. I open it up. And, Dear Eric, congratulations on your upcoming marriage. Even though she went to Alabama, I'm sure I hope you two have a long marriage and can watch football games together. And I'm like, whether he remembered me or not, the fact that he wrote that letter, and my dad wound up reading it at the wedding dinner the night before the wedding, and really ticked off my now ex-wife and her dad. But just the definition of class. He did not need to write that letter. And I wish I had a copy of it, Debbie, to get to you, but unfortunately, actually, the ex-wife has now become a very good friend again. So, but she can't find the letter. She thinks, she can't find the letter. So I wish I could have that to donate. And it was that's what piqued my interest with this project when Mary Beth Roman Schmidt got a hold. Tip of the glass there to Mary Beth for getting us together, folks. Please be sure you check out dearjoepa.org and enjoy the stories there. Share your stories there. And we've got Joe's birthday, 100th birthday coming up December 21st, 2026. And I know that December 21st because I was a month to the day late. My birthday was originally supposed to be on Joe's birthday, December 21st. Free catering, free swimming pool. I stuck around an extra month. I was born on January 21st. So, it's oh boy, Joe Paterno for life, Penn State for life. And can I get one more, folks?
We are
We are.
Penn State.
Great. Joe,
AJ, Justin, Steve, Debbie, thank you all so much. And on behalf of all over the place, Jim, thank you for sitting in and putting up with the blue and white blood here, the mini Nittany Nation we have here. And everyone, thanks for listening or watching all over the place. We thank you. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll be back real soon. Maybe some Penn Staters, maybe not. We'll see what happens. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All over the place, where the fun sanity never ends.